good technician is so important.
Hmm.
Leslie, you're awesome.
Yes. Well, thanks. I'm not doing a whole lot. We're just rolling with the punches here. You never know what's going to happen. Okay, I think we're good to go now. Hello, everyone. We got a bunch of you hopping on here. Great. Getting our YouTube rolling, hopefully. Yep, we're good to go. So, welcome. We are excited to have you here at the Healthy Heart webinar. And today we're going to be talking about arrhythmias, or as Dr. Saunders said, arrhythmia. So, I might be saying that wrong, but either way, I think you know what I mean. Well, why do I look so tan? Do I look really tan in this picture, or
You
is it just me?
do. No, you look
Okay,
tan.
I
Have you
think it's
been to
just the
Florida recently?
no, I wish. No, I think it must be my camera. So, I'm really not that tan. So, I wish I was. Actually, I am in South Dakota, for those of you who don't know, and it has been really nice here. We've had a lot of rain, but the weather has been lovely and makes me feel like I'm in Florida. So it does make me happy. Okay, so we want to go ahead and get started right away. Those of you who are joining on Zoom, feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A. That is the best place for us to manage those. And YouTube, Facebook, post in the comments. We'll get to as many of those as we can. So today, again, we're going to talk about arrhythmias. I think we better start out with like, what is an arrhythmia? Do I have one? How do I know? What do I do? Should I be worried? And also, Dr. Saunders is not your doctor, but he does play one on TV. No, I'm just kidding. He is actually a medical doctor, but he isn't your doctor. And so we just ask that you would consult with your healthcare provider before you implement any of the things that we talk about today. So here we go. Dr. Saunders, tell us about arrhythmias.
Okay. Arrhythmia means not rhythmic. That's all it means. Arrhythmia is without a rhythm. And so normally if you measure your heart rate and you like hold on to your wrist right here and you go, it's going boom, 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 boom. Well, mine's a little slow, boom, boom. But it is going in a rhythm. So you could set your watch by it. You could keep a drum beat going by it. The heart is very rhythmic normally, and when it's arrhythmic, that means it's not in rhythm. That means it's doing something else, and sometimes it would be something like going too fast. So you're just sitting there minding your own business, and all of a sudden your heart starts going boo 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 really fast, and you're like, oh my gosh, my heart is beating out of my chest. I feel like I'm gonna have a heart attack or something. And then you run to the ER, and they say you have supraventricular tachycardia. I was like, what? That means supraventricular means above the ventricle, it means in the atrium. Tachycardia, tachy means fast, cardia means heart. Your heart is going fast. That's all it means. So why is that important? Well, because you need enough time for your heart to fill up and then push the blood out. If it's just going like that, then it can move some blood through, but it's not a very efficient way of moving blood through. So I guys got to tell you a story. So one time, this was in Lompoc. This was a long time ago when I used to do hospital work. There was someone that came in and he had supraventricular tachycardia. And in medical school, we learned that there are a couple of things you can do for the brain to shut down that fast heart rate. And one of them is to put your whole face in ice cold water. So you just dunk your face in ice water. The ice water on your face tells your brain to slow the heart down, really slow. So have you ever heard of like Wim Hof, who holds the record for swimming under the ice? That he relies on that um, uh, it's a reflex mechanism for the cold on the face slows down the heart, and then he can swim all hundreds of yards under the ice and break a record, right? Well, there's one other thing you can do that we learned in medical school, and that is right up in here where you feel your pulse. It's called the carotid artery. There's a carotid bulb, and if you push really hard on that, it will do the same thing because it registers pressure there, And if you put a whole bunch of pressure there, then the brain will automatically slow down the heart to stop that from happening. So, so the ER called me one day and they said, "There's a guy in here with supraventricular tachycardia that won't go down. We've given him medications and nothing's working, and so we want you to admit him to the hospital." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I show up in the ER and I check him out, and his heart rate is like 150, 160, something like that, and so I felt his pulse right there, and then I pushed really hard, and it immediately came down to normal and just stayed normal, like rhythmic. So it was in rhythm, and it was a normal rhythm, you know, in the 70s or 80s or whatever. And everybody in the air was like, "Wow, we tried everything," and you just walk in there like, "Oh, Dr. Saunders." It's just a medical school trick, you know. That's one of the things we learned. So if you ever have tachycardia, like supraventricular tachycardia, if you've ever heard of that, and your heart's beating really fast, you could put your face in ice cold water, or you can feel your pulse right there and then push really hard on the carotid bulb and see if you can get that down before having to go to the emergency department. So there's a little trick you can have. So arrhythmia is generally any time it's out of rhythm. So one of the most common is something called atrial fibrillation. And what that means is the atrium, which is the top part of the heart, is separate from the ventricle, which is the bottom part of the part of the heart. So they usually go, the atrium goes boom, and then immediately following that, the ventricle goes boom. So then they're going boom, 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 boom. And you can actually hear when your heart beats, your rhythm is boom, boom. It's not boom, 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 or boom, 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 boom. It's boom, 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 boom. There's just like a slight pause in between the atrium ventricle, and then a pause, and atrium ventricle, pause, atrium ventricle. So that's why that happens. So if the atrium is fibrillating, what that means is it's not coordinated. It's just kind of the muscle is contracting randomly in different areas of the heart, and it's not coordinated. The ventricle stays coordinated because if the ventricle fibrillates, then it's not moving blood, and then you die. So ventricular fibrillation is death. Atrial fibrillation, however, is just, I don't know, people live with it for many, many years. One of the problems, though, is if your atrium is fibrillating, it's not moving blood through. So the blood just kind of can sit around there and swirl around a little bit, and you can get clots forming. And if you get clots forming, then those clots can go down into the ventricle and go up into your body. Well, if they go into a muscle somewhere, you might have something. It won't do much because there's redundant circulation, and you'll get it somewhere else. But if it goes into your brain, which 20% of your blood gets to the brain, then you get a stroke. And so that's the big deal with atrial fibrillation: is how do we prevent clots from forming and then going up into the brain and causing a stroke? And so people with atrial fibrillation are often put on blood thinners to prevent strokes. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually okay. As far as medications go, those blood thinners are okay. However, what if you looked at it a different way and said, number one, how could we prevent clots from forming in the first place? And then number two, how could we prevent atrial fibrillation in the first place? So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of arrhythmias, and I'm not going to go through all of them. You could have a bundle branch block and intermittent atrial flutter and all that stuff. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is when you have an arrhythmia, what that means is your heart doesn't have enough energy. So it's energy. That's the problem. So when you get enough energy, then it just functions well, like it's supposed to. Boom, 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 like it's supposed to. And that's what we're looking for. So instead of looking at it as, oh, you have atrial fibrillation, let's stop the clots from happening, getting into your brain. Step back one more step and go, wait a minute. why do I have atrial fibrillation? And how do I get rid of that? And that's really the issue. So we deal with that somewhat in the Healthy Heart Solution Kit. In that, we talk about how to get energy back into the heart. And this works for heart failure. It works for arrhythmias, atrial fibrillation. What you want to do is have adequate energy to the heart. So people with type 2 diabetes very commonly get all of these arrhythmias and problems because the heart needs to use fat for energy, and type 2 diabetes has high insulin. Insulin blocks you from using fat for energy. So then you don't have enough energy for the heart. So getting insulin resistance down is probably one of the first things you have to do if you have an arrhythmia. And what's interesting about that is that you may have insulin resistance without ever having any signs of diabetes. So they don't test your insulin when you do tests. Your metabolic panel does not include insulin. It does not include C-peptide. All they include is glucose. And sometimes they'll look at hemoglobin A1C. But you can have a perfectly normal glucose and a perfectly normal hemoglobin A1C and be non-diabetic and still have insulin resistance and still have high insulin and still have potential heart problems. So that's still something to look at. If you have arrhythmia, don't neglect those tests. You need to test for insulin. Otherwise, you won't know because if your insulin is high, it can bring the sugar down to normal and your glucose can stay normal, but your insulin is high. That means you have insulin resistance. That means you don't use fat for energy. One clue, if you have a lipid test, lipid panel, and it'll look at your triglycerides. And the triglycerides that are high, over 100, especially if they're over 150, that's a good indication that you're probably insulin resistant because you're not using that fat for energy. The triglycerides are the fats that you use for energy. That's part of your energy system. In fact, a normal system, a normal body, 60% of your energy is going to come from fat and 40% from glucose, sugar. So it's not mostly sugar energy. Actually, it's mostly fat energy. And when you decrease that fat that you use for energy, you actually decrease the amount of energy that you have. You make less ATP. We've talked about ATP in the past, as that's what the cell uses for energy. The cell does not use fat and glucose and protein for energy. The mitochondria convert that fat and glucose and protein to ATP, and that's what the cell uses for energy. So when you have when you're using less fat for energy, because fat is much more efficient and makes much more ATP, then you actually have less ATP. And then you're more likely to get something like arrhythmias of your heart. So when you see those high triglycerides, that's a clue that you should look at your insulin level to see if you have insulin resistance, because that's a very likely thing. So the cholesterol doesn't matter. It's the triglycerides that are high. High triglycerides is a potential problem. So then what do you do about that? If you have this problem with whatever it is, insulin resistance or energy system problems, whatever it is, find out the root of the problem and fix the problem. So there's a lot of other different things that can happen from that. So for example, if you're lacking in something called carnitine, carnitine is a very important little molecule that brings the triglycerides, the fat, into the mitochondria so they can exchange it for ATP. If you don't have carnitine, then you don't transfer that fat into the mitochondria and you don't make as much ATP. So a lack of carnitine is one. And another one is coenzyme Q10. If you don't have enough coenzyme Q10, then you're not going to be able to make enough energy. And those are kind of common issues in people with arrhythmias. Another very common one is a mineral called magnesium. And everybody's heard of magnesium, but we don't talk about the deficiency of magnesium. People say, "Oh, I got to take calcium so my bones don't wear away." But actually, magnesium is more important to prevent osteoporosis than calcium because calcium is abundant. Calcium is everywhere. Every food you have has calcium in it. They are adding calcium like crazy to foods. There's not a lack of calcium, and yet people are popping calcium pills, and they often don't think that magnesium is the real problem because you also need magnesium to build bone. But magnesium is an important part of over 300 different metabolic reactions in your body. In other words, your ability to make energy is really dependent on magnesium. And when you're deficient in magnesium, your systems do not function well. So you don't want magnesium to be the bottleneck of making energy. So adding magnesium is a good idea. Some people take magnesium to sleep at night because it relaxes. Why does it relax? Because it's energy. So did you know? Okay, this is how the muscle works. And these are heart muscles too. All your muscles in your body, they work the same way. And I like the analogy of the mousetrap. So you have this mousetrap. It's the old-fashioned kind that you have to. Have you ever seen the ones that they have a spring on them? They're spring-loaded, right? So you have to set the mousetrap, and then you set the little thing, and then you have a trigger right there, right? And it just takes a little mouse touch to, bam, the mousetrap goes up, right? That's what your muscles do. They have to put the energy in to reset them, and then they have a little teeny trigger when the brain sends a signal. It goes bam, and the muscle contracts. But it needs energy to relax again, and that's the way your heart works. That's the way all your muscles work. So the reason the heart or the muscles don't relax, or they contract, or you get spasms of your muscles, or you can't relax very well, is sometimes because of a lack of energy. And magnesium is a common problem that way. So I have lots of people who've told me, "Oh, yeah, I started taking magnesium at night, and my whole body relaxes. I go to bed, I don't get cramps anymore, and things function better." Well, of course, because now you can make energy, whereas before you were limited in the amount of energy. So, magnesium is another reason why you could get arrhythmias. If you don't have enough magnesium, you're not going to make energy very efficiently, and the heart doesn't relax fast enough. So parts of the heart are beating while other hearts are still trying to relax, and then they finally reset, and then they beat, and then the other one beats, and then the other one beats, and that's what atrial fibrillation is. It's these irregular beats because they're all resetting at different times. Sometimes that's a magnesium problem. Aside from that, there is one more thing, and that is getting enough mitochondria. If you go for a period of time where you don't have enough energy for not enough magnesium, for not enough L-carnitine, for not enough oxygen, if you have lack of blood flow because of constriction of blood vessels or atherosclerosis or something, and you have a lack of blood flow, then you actually lose mitochondria, those little bacteria that exchange your sugar and fat for ATP. If you have fewer of them, then you don't make as much ATP, and then you can get arrhythmias of the heart. And so what you need then is to make more mitochondria. And one of the things that seems to be really helpful in that is to get a sugar called ribose, D-ribose. Ribose is a sugar molecule that we don't use for energy, but we do use it for making deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, right? Or RNA, ribonucleic acid. That ribo is ribose. And it's something that you have to eat. People do make it in their bodies, and it's in food. But a lot of the foods that people eat today don't have ribose in them. So if you're not eating a lot of fruit and vegetables, whole nuts and seeds, grains, you're probably not getting very much ribose. If you're eating hamburgers and hot dogs and pizza, you're probably not getting a lot of ribose. So one of the things that has been shown to be helpful, Dr. Stephen Sinatra did a lot of work on this. He's a cardiologist in New York, did a lot of work on this and wrote several books on it. And so he indicates that you should be taking it, like everybody with heart disease should be taking, especially heart failure, should be taking CoQ10, L-carnitine, magnesium, and ribose. The ribose to help build more mitochondria so that you have more energy for the heart. So those are the things that we have for energy in the heart in order to prevent and to treat, even reverse, arrhythmias of the heart.
Awesome.
What is ribose? Is it a sugar, amino acid, mineral?
It's a sugar.
Sugar.
Yeah, it's a sugar.
So interesting. Someone had asked about, wow, I am still glowing, had asked about magnesium. Can you get too much?
Yes, you can. You'll get diarrhea if you take too much, but you know what? It's not a big deal. It's just a loose stool. In fact, some people do it on purpose by taking milk of magnesia as a laxative, and that's what happens when you get too much. So when you take milk of magnesia as a laxative, you're actually absorbing a certain amount of the magnesium, but the part you don't absorb goes down into your large intestine, and it causes you to have a bowel movement. So yes, you can get too much.
What about the topical spray that we have? Like,
Okay,
will that affect
so
your bowels?
no, and that's why we did that. When we looked at magnesium as a supplement, going through all of the same issues we're talking about, how common magnesium deficiency is, we looked at what are the options, and the different forms of oral magnesium are abundant. You can just buy them anywhere. And you know what? It turns out that people are advertising, oh, this magnesium glycinate is the only one to take because it's better absorbed than the magnesium oxide or magnesium citrate. You know what? All of that is a bunch of bunk. It's not real. Because, oh, yes, they're not lying to you technically. Because your 150 milligrams of magnesium glycinate is equivalent to 400 milligrams of magnesium oxide. Okay, true. And if you have issues with getting diarrhea from the magnesium oxide, yeah, you might do better with the magnesium glycinate. That's all okay. But there isn't like a magic neuro magnesium that's going to help your brain better than other ones, or help your energy systems better than other ones. Getting magnesium is getting magnesium. So it's important to get it. So since the oral ones were so abundant and everywhere, then we said, oh, well, look at the topical ones. And so you can absorb a certain amount of magnesium topically. So we have a spray, because the spray was kind of hard to find, and it's easy to get, but you have to spray it all over. You get very little of it absorbed through your skin. So you have to, people think they might like 2 spritzers or something. That's not the way it works. You kind of have to count to 100 and spray 100 times all over your body.
I think the dosage is like 30 to 50 sprays. So it's
yeah.
arms, legs, stomach, it's all over. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a couple of interesting questions that came up. Let's see. I'll read them separately here. Beverly said that she found out the hard way that drug interactions can cause arrhythmias. In my case, Levoquin was prescribed on top of an older antidepressant, resulting in the arrhythmia. I was 60 at the time with a history of hypertension. So they did a catheterization that showed I had the arteries of an 18-year-old, which was good to know.
Yeah, Levoquin is a problem. So that's a big deal. Those are very toxic, and they kill mitochondria. All of those, the ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin, and any antibiotic with the word floxin on it is quite toxic to mitochondria. And so it wasn't a drug-drug interaction so much as that the levaquin killed off the mitochondria and created the arrhythmia and the energy problems. So, what do you do about fluoroquinolone toxicity? And all you can do is rebuild the mitochondria, and that takes exercise, and then those 4 supplements that we talked about: the L-carnitine, CoQ10, magnesium, D-ribose, and then getting enough exercise. And that's what it takes, because you have to like start from scratch and rebuild them.
Okay, and Beverly had said, which other common drug interactions are there? That was the bottom of the message I didn't see.
Oh, well, yeah, toxicity. Okay, common, ciprofloxacin, all of those antibiotics. Those antibiotics, they work on an enzyme that is found in bacteria, but it's also found in mitochondria. And so that's how it kills mitochondria. It also kills the bacteria. So it works. It's a good antibiotic, but it has terrible toxicity problems. Other things that are toxic that can decrease the available energy are things that block cholesterol production, for example. The cholesterol is necessary for most of all of your steroid hormones, vitamin D, and it will block coenzyme Q10 from being made. So people who are taking these cholesterol medications have low CoQ10. And that's where Dr. Sinatra found, as a cardiologist, like putting everybody on medications to block cholesterol, and ends up with a whole bunch of people with congestive heart failure because they don't have enough CoQ10. So that's why he added CoQ10 to his regimen.
Okay. Roy had also said, my daughter once had an infection as a teen that caused her to have a tachycardia event where she spent 2 days at the hospital. It was an exciting event when it first happened. Later, my wife calmed down once she knew what was going on. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, so that kind of arrhythmia could be from cardiomyopathy, or myocarditis is where viruses can get into the heart muscle just like they can anywhere else. So if you've ever had a flu and you got aches all over and your muscles hurt and it hurts to walk and it hurts to lift things and it hurts to do anything, the viruses actually get into the muscle cells and damage the muscle cells. Well, that can happen to the heart too. And so those viruses getting into the heart can cause arrhythmias also. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, more questions. Anonymous says, conventional medicine has a tendency to refuse to order certain labs which are essential for healing, such as insulin sensitivity, free T3, RT3, reverse T3, et cetera, et cetera. I have Hashi and wish to address any metabolic problems I may have. They claim that those labs are not necessary. Are there any labs I can turn to which are reasonably priced and do not require a doctor's order?
Yeah. What was the one you talked about yesterday?
I think that was request a test.
Request a test. Yeah. There was one called anylab.com, and I don't know if that's still around. Request a test. Yeah. And so you can request your own test, and they're surprisingly inexpensive. They'll send you a kit. You got to find a phlebotomist to draw your blood. And you can get a lot of tests done, and I'm surprised at how inexpensive they are compared to what the lab charges to the insurance companies and to the patients, the local lab that I look at. Every once in a while I get to see what things cost, and they're not cheap, but Request a Test was surprisingly affordable.
Okay. Let me see here. Did that one? Okay, Tony. Hey, welcome back, Tony. I have Hashimoto's, weight loss, resistance, inflammation, chest pains. What would you recommend?
Hashimoto's, weight loss, resistant, chest pain. Okay, so what you've described as symptoms, and so it's important to know why you have those symptoms. What is the chest pain? Is it chest wall pain from costochondritis? or is it chest pain from the heart? That would be a totally different issue. Weight loss resistance, if you're overweight, then there's a reason for that too. So then you ask why. Why is it resistant to losing weight? And most often I find that is insulin resistance, because insulin is the only hormone that you have that can put on weight. There is no other hormone. If you're type 1 diabetic and you don't make any insulin, you cannot put on weight. You will not put on weight unless you start injecting insulin. So the other way works too. If your insulin is really high, then you can try to lose weight all you want. It's not going to work because the insulin won't allow you to use that fat for energy. You'll just have less energy is all that happens. And so the Hashimoto's is an autoimmune kind of problem. And sometimes it's an autoimmune problem. Sometimes I've had a lot of people diagnosed with Hashimoto's that don't have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. They don't have inflammation of their thyroid gland. They have some antibodies against the thyroid peroxidase. That's all they have. And that is not the criteria for Hashimoto's thyroiditis. That's one criteria, but that's not all of it. And so knowing what your antibody levels are, knowing their inflammatory markers, and then maybe if it's autoimmune, then you can be on an autoimmune protocol and reverse that. So, knowing what it is, why you have those issues is really going to help you to know what to do about it. Because if you don't know why, then, you're shooting in the dark and you could be doing the wrong thing.
Okay, and I had a note, it was actually Tony's wife that was asking this question. So just so we know.
And what is the autoimmune protocol? So you have two people who said they had Hashimoto's already.
Yeah. Okay. So Hashimoto's is an inflammatory condition of the thyroid. It generally could have an enlarged thyroid sometimes, or nodules, and there's generally something wrong with the output of the thyroid. In other words, your hormones, your thyroid hormones, are going to be out of whack, out of balance, or too high or too low, and usually too low in the case of Hashimoto's. But I've had a lot of people, because they have antibodies against the thyroid peroxidase enzyme, that they just assume Hashimoto's thyroiditis without really looking at what's going on. You have to know what your T3 is, your T4. It's a good idea to look at the reverse T3. And most doctors only look at the TSH, and if the TSH is normal, they don't even look at the T4. They don't have any, other tests to go by. But if the TPO is high, then they'll say it's Hashimoto's, and they'll put people on thyroid medication without knowing what the problem is. So most of the time, the problem is not the antibodies. That's not the issue. It is converting the T4, which is inactive, to the T3, which is the active form of thyroid. And that conversion process requires a deiodinase enzyme that can be inhibited by cortisol. So if your stress, especially long-term stress, will prevent you from making your perfectly normal amount of T4 into T3. And so if you look at the numbers, this is what the doctors do, is they look at TSH, T4, and they go, that's normal, you don't have a thyroid problem. Other doctors look at all of them, the T3, and they say, oh, your T3 is low, let's give you some thyroid hormone, without saying, wait a minute, why is the T3 low? And you have normal T4 and low T3, that means you're not converting it. And that is an indication of an adrenal problem. So then instead of looking to the thyroid, you'd have to look to the adrenals, fix that first. That would make a lot more sense. So those people who actually do have Hashimoto's, who actually do have an autoimmune thyroid disease, can be on what's called an autoimmune protocol. And there are various ones that do that. And mostly they are diets that have no grains or cereals. They really avoid sugar. Most fruits are out. Berries are generally okay. There's the one I generally put people on is the paleo autoimmune protocol. And if you go online and look up paleo autoimmune diet, that's a pretty good one because it doesn't have any inflammatory things in it. But one thing that's often left out in people focusing too much on the diet is that you have to have enough vitamin D. Vitamin D is a very important immune stimulator. And the vitamin D binding protein is called macrophage activating factor. And it allows your cellular immunity, called the innate immunity, to function properly. And when that functions properly, then you start making antibodies properly. So everything works. So it's a good idea to fix those things first, the adrenal glands first, and then consider the autoimmune protocol diet and making sure you have enough vitamin D. And then the other things include zinc and bioflavonoids, which include vitamin C, and then a whole list of bioflavonoids like lutein and quercetin, all the tins, everything with an IN at the end is a bioflavonoid. So those are the things that are important for the autoimmune protocol.
Good information. Tony and or his wife said very helpful, appreciate all of the information. So thank you so much for that. I was going to mention, oh, you know what? And I also, Delmont sent a message asking about Cheryl. And I just realized sometimes I start these webinars and I don't even introduce us. So if you are here for the first time, I am so sorry. I am Leslie. I am a co-host.
I'm Scott.
I'm a co-host on this webinar. And so my job is just to kind of run the webinars, do some of the background stuff. We have Dr. Scott Saunders. He is our medical doctor. He does a lot of stuff. So I would honestly, we could introduce him, but it will take forever if we listed all of his credentials and the places that he has worked. And we joke about it every time he's on. We learn something new.
I have one credential: curiosity.
True.
I just want to know how everything works. That's all.
I love it. And that's why we love you so much, because that is what makes you special and different. And you're willing to look at difficult cases. And we appreciate that. So, but I want to introduce Cheryl because sometimes I forget to do this. And in fact, Cheryl, will you tell us well, first of all, I'll say this. Cheryl's been around the Barton team for a long time. She has been a big part of our home cures that work, which I'll let her talk about. And she also oversees all of our customer support. And so she kind of knows everything. Honestly, she knows a lot. And so I love having both her and Dr. Saunders on here because I think the two of them probably know more about health than anybody on our team. So I'm going to let her chat a little bit about home cures that work, and then also what she does for the customer support team.
I ask questions. I think that's all I do here. Leslie and Dr. Scott just run the show. I'm here kind of as an extra, I feel like. But Home Cures at Work is a website that Dr. Saunders started writing for about 16 years ago. And so he writes an article every month for this publication. And so I kind of put it online. One of the new things about Home Cures at Work is that we used to require membership. Now we don't. So you used to have to pay to read Dr. Saunders articles. So now you can go and read them for free. And if you have a question about anything in your mind, go to Home Cures at Work. We have other articles, other authors, but you can usually find an answer to one of your health questions. Focuses on natural remedies. So all the way down from something like acne. We've had articles on acne to heart health. Dr. Saunders writes his articles and then he speaks about them here. So you can kind of get more detail in the Home Cures at Work articles. And then I moved into customer service as well. And so I have a great team that answers your phone calls and writes back on your emails. And we listen to the webinars every week. We choose a different webinar so we educate ourselves on how to help you because we want to know what's in your best interest. So I love listening to these and learning as well from like you guys. So yeah, and then I come and I get to spend a wonderful hour here.
Yeah,
Awesome.
this month I'm writing one right now on cancer, which is really interesting. I've read some books on alternative cancer cures, and so I'm writing about that.
That'll be fun. Raise your hand if you want us to have a webinar where we talk about some of that information. It'll probably get banned, so you'll have to be on live and catch it while it's live because they'll probably take it down.
Interesting.
Yes. Okay, good stuff. Oh, I just saw a question. Oh, you know what? Actually, Cheryl, can you post the Home Cures link in the chat?
Yep, in a second.
Yeah, we got a couple of people asking about that. Such good information there. Okay, I'm going to move on to some more questions. Go ahead and post those in the Q&A. We'll try to get through these. Nikki says, hello, Dr. Saunders. I have a friend that has a leaky valve and she has a low heart rate, 54. Also, her calcium score is 0. Is there anything she can do to help raise her heart rate?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so it's good to know that the calcium score is 0. What that means is there's no atherosclerosis, there's no vascular disease. The blood vessels are open and fine, and that's not the problem. So check, we've ruled out that problem, right? And then there's a valve. I don't know which valve, but if there's a leaky valve, what that means is there's going to be less efficiency of the heart. The valve, keeps the blood where it's supposed to be, and if the valve is leaking, then the blood flows back into the heart instead of coming from the other side where it's supposed to. And so instead of flowing through, it goes like back and forth a little bit, and so that makes the heart work harder. So the reason that the heart gets bigger and beats slower is because with a leaky valve, it's not as efficient. And so the heart often gets larger. It's kind of like if someone is exercising a lot, like running marathons or doing triathlons or something like that, their hearts get big and kind of floppy, but they beat slowly. And what that does is allows the heart to be a little more efficient in that it can push more blood out, and then the valve's going to leak some back in, but then it gets more out. So it will. So your problem is not the slow heart rate. The next step is to do an echocardiogram, which you've already had. I don't know if you have a leaky valve. You probably already had an echocardiogram to look at the efficiency of the heart and the valve and the possibility of repairing the valve, maybe the need for repair of the valve, because this is not a physiological or biochemical issue. It's an actual mechanical issue. So for a mechanical issue, you need a mechanic, and the mechanic is the surgeon. So there may need to be a heart surgeon to repair the valve, fix the valve, close the valve, somehow make that valve work better, so that the heart can be much more efficient and it won't be so big and floppy and slow.
Okay, Anonymous says, when I have palpitations, I do a Valsalva maneuver.
Valsalva
Okay,
maneuver.
got it. By bearing down and hold my breath for a short period, and it subsides. I also have an alternative method known as 5-2-8. Breathe in deeply for a count of 5, hold breath for 2, then breathe out or exhale for a count of 8 or 8 seconds. Repeat the cycle 3 to 4 times. This not only drops the blood pressure, but also corrects the arrhythmia.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, okay, so that's different than like the supraventricular tachycardia. That's stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. which has the relaxing effect, slows down the heart. It's the autonomic part of your nervous system that has the relaxation part. So yeah, you can do the deep breathing, the diaphragmatic breathing. That helps. The 5-2-8, holding your breath, breath holding, Valsalva, those kinds of things. That will also do that.
Good stuff. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, Jill says, what can you do to address adrenal issues evidenced by T4, T3 reading?
Okay. Yeah. So your T4 is normal, it's like 1.0, and your T3 is low, like 2.5, 2.2 or something like that. And you go, gosh, how come you have normal T4 with this low T3? And then feeling fatigued all the time and can't get going in the morning and feel like I'm slogging through Jello all day long and I'm cold all the time. And your TSH is normal and your T4 is normal. And your doctor says, no, you're perfectly fine. There's no problem. But what you have is an adrenal problem. So then your question is, well, what do you do about the adrenal problem? Well, that's what the next step is, to test. Instead of saying, oh, let's give you T3, which I often do in those kind of cases, I will give somebody like a natural thyroid a supplement that includes T3, or even give them straight to T3, tyrosine or something like that, that allows them to function normally until we can figure out the adrenal issues. And so figuring out the adrenal issues is another issue altogether. And that's where you have to look at the pituitary gland and the cortisol output. You have to do a 24-hour urine test. You have to find out what's going on. Is it just a stress issue? Long-term stress is one thing that will do it, but adrenal tumors do it too, and pituitary tumors do it too. And I've seen all of those. So yeah, that's the next step. But it's not a simple like, oh, just do this.
Oh, we have a question here from Roy. Why is there no vitamin D in your immune support?
Because it's in synochroma. See, that's the issue. What do we put where? You know, when we were making synochroma, we said, oh, we got to have berberine in the synochroma. No, we got to have berberine separate because berberine can be used for other things. But vitamin D is so important for the blood sugar, and it's so common to have a deficiency that we decided to put it in the blood sugar support, called synochroma, instead of the immune support. So, and you know what? The synochroma, you don't have to be diabetic to take it. You don't have to have a blood sugar issue. I take it, and I take it because it has vitamin D and chromium and selenium, and those are common deficiencies. So, yeah.
I think everyone on our team uses synochroma, so just so that you guys are aware of that too. It's a really good product. I'm posting the link in the chat for immune support, but you can also find synochroma by following that link. Use code webinar25. It's one word and you'll save 25%. All right. Let's see, Cheryl, did you see any other questions come through here that I might have missed?
I'm muted. I didn't see. You answered all of them.
Okay.
But we do have someone who just said, I have a 0 calcium score, but aorta has atherosclerosis.
Okay. So what that's telling us is that in your heart, the medium vessels, there's no atherosclerosis. There's no calcium deposits. There's no clots that form in there. The aorta commonly has atherosclerosis separate from like the medium vessels or the small vessels that are in the heart. The aorta has, even in children, they see cholesterol streaks in the aorta. And that's just a different issue entirely, and is not necessarily atherosclerosis.
Claire said, my urologist diagnosed me with an overactive bladder. He gave me pills that don't work with lots of side effects. He called me last week and told me he has scheduled me for a Botox injection in my bladder. I'm very concerned. What do you think about having Botox injection in the bladder? Does it help?
Okay. Botox is paralysis. It is a toxin. That's why it's called Botox, botulinum toxin. The botulinum toxin comes from Clostridium botulinum, Clostridium botulinum, that makes this toxin and is one of the most toxic substances known to man. Because once you inject it, it'll stay. It doesn't go away for like 3 months. It stays there. So once you get this toxin in your body, it doesn't go away. So when they inject it, they're injecting very small amounts to paralyze your bladder. So it's called bladder paralysis. So what they're saying is that you have a bladder spasms. In order to stop the spasms, we're going to paralyze your bladder. So is that a good thing? Well, it might relieve the symptom, sometimes it does. And it could be helpful as for temporary relief. But then after 3 months, what? Then you're back to where you started. And the other option or the other possible complication is you can get a bladder that doesn't work anymore, that just gets floppy, then that causes other problems. So it could work. There are potential side effects, problems with it. I don't think it's a permanent solution. And so I wouldn't generally look at that. The medications that they gave you are medications that block the impulses to the bladder. So here's what I do for overactive bladder. Find a physical therapist that does pelvic floor PT. And these pelvic floor physical therapists, we have one in Santa Barbara. She's amazing. She's a PhD. She's got her doctorate in physical therapy, specifically of the pelvic area. And I send people to her all the time that have bladder problems and bloating problems. And she's really good with finding what the cause is and helping people to get over it and improve. So I think pelvic floor PT, a pelvic physical therapist, is someone that I send them to. And then the other thing is to use the autonomic nervous system to your benefit. So when you have to urinate, when you feel like you have to urinate, that is stimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's so the problem is often in the autonomic nervous system. So what you need to do is fix that. And if you fix the autonomic nervous system, everything else gets better too. Your blood pressure will get normal. You won't get dizziness or vertigo. Your temperatures will be better regulated. Your heart rate and your breathing and oxygen levels will be regulated better. So there are several ways to do that. If you've ever heard of Wim Hof, the Wim Hof method is a wonderful method for coming to know and control your autonomic nervous system. Some people do yoga breathing. Someone just was on here just a few minutes ago that Leslie read him saying he does the 8-5-2 breathing, or there's the square breathing, the 4-4-4 breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4. No, you breathe out for 8, I think it is. Anyway, there's all these kinds of box breathing and various things. These breathing techniques you are actively controlling your diaphragm. So the idea is not to let your chest rise, but to keep your chest from rising and just let your abdomen rise. So your belly should go up and down, and that means you're using your diaphragms to breathe, and that means you're using your parasympathetic nervous system, or you're stimulating that parasympathetic nervous system. So that will help the urine, and then the pelvic floor PT. I think that is the best way, and I've had it work. I've never had it not work. So at least nobody's come back to me and said that didn't work. And so I've never had to send anybody for Botox injections.
Good information. I know we're out of time. I'm going to ask this quick. Day 57, phase 1 of the diabetes solution kit, 69 years young. Stop taking both high blood pressure meds, perindopril and amlodipine. I know this word.
Amlodipine.
Amlodipine. If they're not spelled perfectly, I'm not going to get it. Okay. At the start, blood pressure is excellent, but the pulse is in the 80 to 90 mostly. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's okay. That will go down as you do more exercise and your heart gets more efficient.
Okay. I know there are a couple more questions, but I know Dr. Saunders needs to go to his patients. So thank you so much, Dr. Saunders.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Thank you, Cheryl. We will be back here next week, same time, same place. Invite a friend. And you can go to bartonwebinar.com for more information about us. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.